Hi everyone, the Mature Simmer here. So this video is going to be very different than what is typically out there, which is showing gameplay and a lot of footage with a lot of movement and graphics, because the focus is explaining the thought process and the planning that you could put into what you're going to do with an FS22 game as a single player. So what you can expect to get out of this video is an understanding of how I approach figuring out exactly what I'm going to do to keep myself busy in single player, how I'm going to play, what I'm going to do, and kind of the planning that goes into it, because I think for new farming simulator players, this is one of the most daunting things. Given that the game is a sandbox to let you do what you want with it, sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming to determine how to do that. You may look at some of the videos you see either on my channel or other farming simulator YouTube channels and try to figure out, like, well, how did they pick that map? How did they use those mods? While it may be somewhat intuitive, some would say, I just wanted to have a video out there for those folks who are just starting out, who might be a bit intimidated by all the options you have, and give you some sort of a checklist that you want to at least think about before you begin your FS22 journey. So the reason I've decided to put this video out, now that we're approaching about 3 months since the release, there's enough things out there that we're really approaching that sweet spot of the point where it's starting to feel like FS19, where there's enough choice out there for a player to do what they want and set things up. There's certainly areas, such as older equipment, that are still lacking having a lot of choice, but things are certainly getting better every day. So with that, I hope you'll stick around, listen to what I have to say, and I'm hoping this topic will generate a lot of opinion and a lot of passion from people who may think maybe I missed something, or maybe they think about it a different way and they want to get that out into the world. So please comment below and let's have a dialogue, because given the free nature of Farming Simulator to do with it what you want, my way is certainly not the only way, nor perhaps the best way. It just is the best way for me and what I've come up with, and here I'm going to go ahead and share it with you, so I hope you enjoy. So the first thing I tend to think of is the style of gameplay that I'm looking to get into, because to me that dictates almost all the other choices in the other areas that I'll be making. I also want to caveat that with the order I present these steps in this video are not necessarily the order you have to go through them to make this work. You can certainly flip things around if you want to think about equipment ahead of map. I'm just going through a order that is what I typically do. So typically the style of gameplay in Farming Simulator just comes in 3 flavors. You're either doing a survival type series where you're trying to start with nothing or next to nothing, or perhaps on a bigger map, something but nowhere near enough to make it not very difficult. The other style that is obviously kind of the base of the game is just starting out, perhaps even a new farmer mode on a map with whatever you've been given, which should give you enough to be successful on the map, but without making it too simple. Another mode is determining that you're just going to go big and you're going to go with a lot of automation and you're going to have a lot of equipment. That may require different things as well. Overlaid on top of that, what is your philosophy to what you feel is quote-unquote cheating within the game that crosses some line that you're not comfortable with and that you just don't enjoy playing? Again, you're controlling your game environment here. At the end of the day, you may have some haters if you put some information out there that are telling you, well, you cheated in money, but if to you hate the slog of working and building up money and you just want to buy all the fields on the map and start that way, you can do that in Farming Simulator. Go ahead and do that. I mean, the intent is to have fun. That's the number one goal. Let that drive your determination of style. So what you'll find over time as you play Farming Simulator is you'll tend to gravitate to things in some cases, or some people, like myself, tend to like to have a mix, where sometimes I'll have one map that I'm using for a survival type of gameplay. I'll have another map that I'm using for automated big farming. I may have multiples in all of those styles. You're obviously limited to the 20 save game slots, so there is somewhat of a limit to how ambitious you can become. But beyond that, do what makes you happy, do what brings you joy. The next thing I'm going to cover is not really necessarily how you set up your system, but for those people, again, who are newer to Farming Simulator, where do you go to get mods? There's a lot of places out there, and you may have read in some cases, be safe. Some places aren't as legitimate as others, and that's certainly true, and you always want to be careful. So I'm going to share some that I've found to be relatively manageable and that I've not had any issues with. There's certainly others that I'm not going to mention. There's a lot out there, and there are always new sites coming available as well. So let me cover a few that are some of my go-tos. So what's been up on the screen as I've been talking through this first part of the video is ModHub, which is in essence the gold standard. It's the official mod location for Giants. More importantly, it's the only mod location that's integrated into the game. So when you go into FS22 and then click on the link to go to downloadable content, this is the content it's going to show you. But you can also go directly to the website and just browse around as well. Part of the reason for that is for console players, ModHub is really the only place they can get mods, which is why console players always have issues with finding things such as maps. They can't run scripts and things like that. But if you're a PC player, kind of the world's your oyster. You've got all the options that you'd like to try, and just be aware that you need to be careful. So another one that's pretty popular is farmingsimulatormods.com, and they tend to number the site for the version we're on. So there was a Farming Simulator 19 mods.com, so forth and so on. And sometimes on some of these you can change to the other ones. So they're all going to have categories, and you'll find that a lot of these other sites are heavy on advertising too. So you're going to be bombarded with things. You're going to see, as you can see here, basically 6 mods on the page before you have to change. That's so that they can keep serving you up ads, because more than likely that's how they're paying to have the site there. But I'd say for me, this is my next site that I look at kind of along with ModHub. They're basically my number 1 and number 2. So another one that's pretty popular is King Mods. Similarly, you can go here to the drop down, and you can see some of the main categories. You can see they're a little bit more graphical. They tell you the number of the type of mods you're looking at, so you've kind of got a little bit more detail to know, am I going to find what I'm looking for? So in this example, if you're wanting a power harrow, you can see that there's only 6 out there compared to 53 cultivators. So another one is FS ModHub, in this case FS22 ModHub. I can't say for certain that some of these sites aren't the same site reskinned. If you notice, obviously Farming Simulator mods and FS mods got the same kind of icon. There's certainly a similar look and feel here, but the list is not always the same in some cases. So I think just because the sites are different, I think it depends which modder submits to which site. Another reason to look at multiple sites is you're not always going to find all the mods in one place. And certainly, ModHub's going to be more restrictive. So the last one I'm going to mention is one that's new that I've seen come on the scene recently. It's by a person, Grizzly Bear Sims. The unique perspective here is they are making sure that they're getting mods directly from the mod creator. As they said, they've been in-game tested and confirmed to be virus-free. But what that means, because they're newer and because in essence there's a vetting process and it's not as simple as some of the other sites for a modder to just submit things and get them listed. Even if you look at this, you can see, there's 3 maps on the site at this point, as opposed to dozens on some of the other sites. Because of what they're trying to enforce, it looks like what I've seen, there's a lot less available. But if you're looking for some sort of comfort that someone else is checking things before, this would definitely be a site you might want to add to your list and at least monitor. So the last thing overall that I'll talk about when you get mods, for whatever reason, because they're trying to generate revenue, they're trying to do whatever, on a lot of these sites, as you go in, click on things, even just going in to look at the detail of the mod. All right, so here you can see it started downloading this ISO file when I just clicked on going into the mod. ISO files can execute. You've got to be careful with them. That's something you want to avoid and look out for. In some cases, that's why people will stay away from a site like this. But if you're paying attention and you're just kind of ready to shut things down, and then if something inadvertently gets on your system, you just go into your download directory and clean it up. You can do pretty well with that. So again, see, now it started doing another serve.iso. So you've got to be aware of what's happening, because things can go on pretty quickly. See, and this is on this site, because I've used it, I know this is kind of what I'm ultimately looking for. So this is an example, again, where you kind of end up tricked into doing the wrong thing. You've got the mod posted up here, and you've got this giant continue button. You would think, okay, this is what I need to do. No, what you need to do is go down here to step 1, which is the free download. This button, these are all things you don't want, and once again can be a little intimidating for people to figure out. We've gotten now to this screen, and then we're going to get to the download file, and then that's okay. That's the file we want. I'm not going to cover how you use them, how you install them. Hopefully, if you're interested in doing this, you've got some understanding of that, but at the base, you're just putting it in your mods folder, and you can also do other things that I'll mention at the end of this video, and then connect you to a tutorial on my site that'll help you manage your mods a little bit better. Okay, so the next thing you're going to be thinking about is, what type of map do you want? Do you want a standard size map? Do you want a 4x map? Do you want a bigger map? What are you looking at as far as the working type in size? The other choice on map is, where do you want the map? Do you want a European map? Do you want an American map? Do you want a map that is a real location? Do you want a fictional map? And then you start to get into finer differentiation after that. If I want a European map, do I want it in a specific country? Do I want it to have specific features? So do I want hedges and walls and fences, or perhaps just the opposite? I don't want to keep bumping into things and getting my implements hung up on things. That is frankly a pet peeve of mine in some cases, and part of what frustrates me with a lot of the UK maps, because the reality is what the reality is. It's tight countryside. You're forced to work around low walls and hedges, and depending on if the map author has put collisions into the map in those areas, it just creates frustration for folks like me if you're trying to not constantly be having to back up and so forth. But for others, that may be, hey, that's exactly the challenge I'm looking for right now. Next, once I've decided what kind of map and I've got my style of play, that will start to explain to me what type of equipment I need to look for. In most cases, you're doing things beyond the base game. That's just the nature of what I've found to make it enjoyable, is, finding something unique. You may then look for equipment that's specific to the region. So for example, there's definitely was a trend in FS19 with Polish maps to find Polish equipment, and so you'd see modders just catering to that space because they would definitely get a lot of interest. You might also be looking for, I want older equipment. And as I said, there's always been kind of a shortage of some of that. It's just the nature of the beast. There's probably less people that necessarily want to play that way, that you're just looking for inexpensive equipment. There used to be a mod that was used by a lot of folks in Survival series in FS19 that was this old Russian red combine that was super loud. It was super, super cheap. And so it kind of became the de facto standard to use in a survival gameplay. I would say equipment is where I spend most of my time when I'm trying to put together a series, or as I'm even playing a series and as I'm going along, and I suddenly decide, well, I'm going to do baling, and I haven't had a baler. I will almost always go out to the mod sites and say, okay, what kind of balers do I have, and see if anything just catches my attention. And a lot of times that's what will draw you to a mod, is you'll just be like, hey, I've never played this brand. This looks interesting. Once again, that's the beauty of Farming Simulator. There's no reason not to just go with that. I mean, just have fun and try it out. And if it doesn't work, you sell it in the game, you replace it with something else. So another big one to consider is the buildings and the placeables, I guess, that I would call on the map. What are you going to do with silos? What are you going to do for storage sheds? Are you going to have big ones? Are you going to have small ones? Are you going to have rundown ones? You'll be looking for those type of mods, getting all those set up. The last major category then that I tend to look at is, okay, what kind of gameplay or game feature mods do I want to utilize? In most cases, that will focus on things like auto drive or course play. So I've got a folder I've got labeled as always in my mods folders, and that is the mods that regardless of the map I play, I will use, and those are usually almost always gameplay mods. There will certainly be some equipment mods, but because equipment is sometimes dictated by the size of the map, so once again, I can't use a 60-foot header on a small English map. I'm not going to be able to get it onto the fields, for example, or turn on the fields. Putting that in an always folder doesn't make a lot of sense, but I could always use auto drive. I could always use something like power tools where I can then adjust settings. And kind of the sky's the limit on those type of mods, because it's really just limited to what the imagination of the modder is. So in FS22, one of the major new additions that I love looking for are new productions. One that I came across recently is a production buildings pack that is done predominantly for the German audience because everything's in German, but it obviously doesn't mean that we can't use it. We just need to understand it's going to be in German. But then if I'm on a map that's in a location in Germany, so like NF Marsh, for example, I may be like, hey, these would be perfect because they're going to fit, they're going to be in the language of the area, they're going to give me products that are German products and they're unique. So it's those type of things then you're looking for from the gameplay mod standpoint of how immersive you want to make your experience. Gameplay mods hit another style of gameplay that I guess I really didn't talk about, which is that realistic gameplay. The one that is out, that is the most obvious in this category, is manual attach, where in the base game you just hit Q when you're near something and it attaches everything, your hoses, your hitch, and so forth. With manual attach, you've got to get out of your vehicle and you've got to connect all those things individually. And especially if you're doing like a role play series, you may do placeables, like there's placeable food, there's placeable objects that you can then just decorate your farm. So finally, what do you do if you decide, like me, well, I want a lot of games going at once? In FS19, I used all 20 slots and I would bounce around and I might have my 3 or 4 favorites, but then I'd have others that would be like, yeah, once a month I'd go poke around in it because it was really specific, or it was a specific type of challenge or a specific type of map. You can dump all those in one mod folder, but you can also separate them. And in many cases, as you're getting used to Farming Simulator, I would almost encourage you to try to go down the path of just have the mods you need for the map you're playing and the style you're playing, because you're going to limit your confusion and you're going to limit your conflicts of loading too many mods, because it gets too simple when you load another map of, well, I've got 1,000 mods in my directory. I'm not going to deselect them and pick what I want. I'm just going to go ahead and turn them all on. And sometimes you'll then have conflicts because of the way the map's designed and so forth, and then you're chasing those down. Where if you know specifically what you're doing, you can use something like SGA, which I'll link to here, and so then you can have a tab in that for every map you're playing and keep things fully separated. Now, there's a trade-off, there's a pro and con there, but if you've got large mods that you're using regularly, which might be equipment or buildings, that can add up and you can run out of drive space very quickly if you're using all 20 game slots. So you'll have to find what works for you, but that would be the last piece of advice I'd give somebody, is that just gives you a lot more granular control over your environment. So hopefully this gave you some ideas of how to think about what you do when you're thinking about what your next FS22 adventure is going to look like. As always, please subscribe. If you've liked this video, please drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate that. It helps the channel, it helps us as a community grow and get more people coming in and more conversations starting, and I will see you next time.